Town of Aurora acknowledges that the Anishinaabe lands on which we live and work are the traditional and treaty territory of the Chippewas of Chena Island, as well as many other nations whose presence here continues to this day. As the closest First Nation community to Aurora, we recognize the special relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and as a municipality, we join them in these responsibilities. We further acknowledge that Aurora is part of the treaty lands of the Mississaugas and Chippewas recognized through Treaty Number 13, as well as the Williams Treaties of 1923. Shared understanding of the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and how our collective past brought us to where we are today will help us walk together into a better future. Council, can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Councilor Weiss, Councilor Gallo, comments, questions? Call the vote. You don't have it here? Roll, yes. Councilor Gallo's a yes. Councilor Gillan? Councilor Gillan's yes. Councilor Weiss? Didn't go through. Councilor Weiss is a yes. Councilor Gardner? Councilor Gardner's yes. That carries. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Welcome to Aurora's public planning meeting. The purpose of this public meeting is to inform the public and obtain public input regarding the proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment application. For the planning application that will be considered by council tonight, the following process will occur. 1, town planning staff will outline the purpose of the planning application being considered. 2, then the applicant will be given an opportunity to make a presentation and address issues raised in the staff report or public concerns already filed. 3, following these presentations, members of the public will be invited to offer their comments or concerns respecting the item virtually or in person and may speak twice for up to 5 minutes each time. And 4, following comments from members of the public, I will then ask members of council for their comments. It is very important that the town receive the correct names and addresses of individuals having an interest in the planning applications. Therefore, if you plan to speak to council at this meeting, or if you wish to be notified of any further council or committee meetings concerning the application being considered, you must complete a planning interested party and speaker request form available on the town's website at aurora.ca/planning notice, or contact Planning and Development Services by email at planning@aurora.ca, or complete a green interested party form right up here at the front and leave it with our committee coordinator. Under the Planning Act, the applicant or residents have the right to appeal any decision of council on a planning application to the Ontario Land Tribunal. But you must verbally express any comments or concerns here tonight, or submit any comments or concerns in writing to the town prior to council adopting an amendment. The tribunal may dismiss all or part of an appeal made in respect of an application. This public meeting is being audio and video recorded. Names, addresses, comments, and other personal information are being recorded according to the Municipal Act and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. This will help our town clerk prepare accurate minutes and to create a record that is available to the general public, including the town's website. Questions about this collection should be directed to the town clerk, Town of Aurora. I will now ask the deputy town clerk to confirm that notification to the public occurred as required by the Planning Act. Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Respecting item 5.1, PDS 24-094, application for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, Esmail Zameni, 14086 Yonge Street, Part Lot 1, Plan 132 King as in K 125783, except R679438. The file numbers OPA 2021-05 and ZBA-2021-07. A notice of public planning meeting was mailed to all addressed property owners within a 120-meter radius of the subject lands, published in the local newspapers, posted on the town's website, and posted on signage on the subject lands. Public notification has been provided in accordance with the Planning Act.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. I will now ask the Director of Planning and Development Services to begin with the presentations. Mr. Romano.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our town planner, Kenny Ng, will provide a brief overview of the application. Then we can turn it over to the applicant's planning consultant, Jim Katsopoulos, for his presentation. Thank you.
Mr. Ng?
Apologies, the presentation slides will be available shortly. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and members of public. My name is Kenny Ng, and I'm a planner of the town. Tonight, I will be providing an overview of the subject lands, planning applications, the proposal, as well as next steps. Next slide, please. The subject lands are municipally known as 14086 Yonge Street and are located on west side of Yonge Street, south of Ridge Road. The subject lands are located within a predominantly low density and estate residential area. The subject lands are approximately 0.4 hectare or 1 acre in size. Currently, there's a vacant single detached dwelling on the subject property. Next slide, please. The subject lands are currently designated cluster residential by the town's official plan under OPA 34, also known as the Yonge Street South Secondary Plan. Under the current designation, multi-unit housing such as semi-detached, linked housing, and hot townhouses are permitted. The subject lands are also partially included in the regional corridor. The regional corridor policy was first introduced by the Region of York official plan, which was approved in November 2022. Town official plan containing regional corridor policy was adopted in January this year and approved by York Region in May 2024. The regional corridor policy allows for a maximum building height of 5 stories and promotes a higher density form of development. The region encourages small-scale intensification within the built-up area, with density ranging from 55 to 150 people per hectare. Next slide, please. The subject lands are currently zoned Oak Ridges Moraine Rural General. The current zoning reflects the existing built form and permits for low-density residential development, such as a detached dwelling. Next slide, please. The applicant is proposing a 20-unit townhouse development on the subject lands. To facilitate the development, the applicant has submitted official plan and zoning bylaw amendment to permit the proposed land use. In the future, a draft plan of subdivision, draft plan of condominium, site plan, and part lot control applications will be required. Next slide, please. The official plan amendment will define the regional corridor to include the entire subject lands. This will ensure that the future development aligns with the overarching intent of the regional corridor, while the underlying cluster residential destination remains. Next slide, please. The zoning bylaw amendment will rezone the subject lands from Oak Ridges Moraine Rural General Zone to a site-specific townhouse dwelling residential exception zone. The amendment will alter the development standards on the R8 zone with regards to lot area, height, front and rear yard setbacks. Next slide, please. The proposed townhouse development will provide a total of 20 units, 20 townhouse units within 4 townhouse blocks. As you can see from the site plan, 3 townhouse blocks are located in the center of the site, each containing 6 units. The west end block will contain 2 units. Access will be provided via a private road which extends from Yonge Street. As currently proposed, the private right-of-way would terminate in a hammerhead turnaround. To service residents' parking needs, The development will provide 40 residential parking spaces and 10 visitor parking spaces for a total of 50 parking spaces. 36 of the residential parking spaces are provided within an underground parking level with direct access to each of the individual units. 4 service parking spaces are provided for the 2N units, while the 10 visitor parking spaces are provided on the service level along the south limits of the internal laneway. A 1.8 meter high privacy fence is proposed along the rear yard of the townhouses, which is the south property line, to provide buffering to lands to the south. Next slide, please. Here are some conceptual elevations for the townhouses. They are 3 stories in height or approximately 11 meters tall. Site and urban design will be thoroughly managed in future site plan application. Next slide, please. The applicant has submitted a conceptual block plan to illustrate how the proposed development can connect with lands to the north. The representative from lands to the north have submitted conceptual development plan to the town, and the block plan's road network, delineation of environmental features, potential park, etc., is developed using the conceptual plan that was submitted. As you can see from the block plan, access to neighboring land can be established with either a mid-block road connection or a shared Yonge Street access. The finalized road network will be based on consultation between the landowners and preference of the town and the region. Next slide, please. A community information meeting was hosted by the applicant on June 11th this year, which was attended by the agents, town staff, ward councillor, and members of public. Some topics of discussion that were brought up by the public are as follows. Concerns on the proposed unit density on subject lands and overall density within the entire block plan, specifically with lands to the north. Urban design of the proposed development. Traffic/access management and coordination. Whether existing vegetation will be removed. And lastly, potential noise and dust, added traffic, and long duration of construction resulting from the development. Next slide, please. A preliminary review of the proposed applications has been undertaken by town departments and public agencies prior to scheduling the public planning meeting. Staff have identified the following matters to be addressed in greater detail, which are the following: conformity to the provincial policy statement, the growth plan, regional and local policies, appropriateness of the proposed vehicular access of Yonge Street, compatibility of the proposed site-specific zoning standards, as well as the review of the natural heritage evaluation that was submitted to assist with the application, the appropriateness of the block plan for future development, whether appropriate landscaping buffers and urban design of the proposed dwellings have been provided, availability of municipal servicing capacity, as well as any comments to be received at this public planning meeting. Next up. So next steps in the planning process, staff will continue to review the second submission and provide feedback to the applicant. Comments from the public and the council raised at this public meeting will also be considered. When appropriate, a staff recommendation report for council's consideration will be discussed at a future committee of the whole meeting. All interested party will be notified of any updates related to the subject applications. Next slide, please. That concludes staff's presentation. Please direct any questions or comments on the subject applications to my contact. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Strang. Mr. Romero?
To you, Mr. Mayor, I think we can ask Jim Kotsopoulos, the planner for the applicant, to begin with his presentation. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Mr. Kotsopoulos, welcome.
There it is. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, town staff, and members of the public. I am the planning agent on behalf of the applicant, Jim Kotsopoulos from JKO Planning Services. Mr. Chair, for my presentation, I'm not going to duplicate what Mr. Ng talked about from a policy regime. I will get right into the details of our site plan, particularly rising out of our meeting with the community on June 11th. I will just reiterate, in our opinion, Mr. Chair, from a policy perspective, when you take a look at the policy regime governing these lands, our application, in our opinion, compares and evaluates favorably, particularly when it comes to the PPS, the growth plan, the region of York, and the town of Aurora official plan, particularly from a density and from a build form perspective. In our opinion, Mr. Chair, as we heard, and I'm sure you'll hear from some of the members of the public, in our opinion, given the siting and the location of the lands relative to its context, particularly the abutting lands to the south being low density, single detached, we feel that this build form currently in front of you tonight offers an optimal transition from what could be developed to the north. So in our opinion, Mr. Chair, that would lend itself to conformity on the overarching policy regime being the PPS, the growth plan, the region of York, and the town official plan. So those are my comments on what Mr. Ng talked about. If you can just go to the site plan. And then I would like to hone in on, thank you. So Mr. Chair, this is the current version of the site plan. So this version before June 11th, before our CIM on June 11th was different. So this is a reflection of what we heard that night. And I'll go through some of the components, Mr. Mayor. The first one was, there was actually comments from both the town staff and the public about separating or splitting the massing that created the 18 plus the 2 units. So what you see, Mr. Chair, is we've precisely done, we've offered separation in 3 locations, to the east, to the middle, and then towards the west. So we've split the massing in order to provide obviously a better appearance, especially from the vantage point of the abutting single detached units to the south. The second, Mr. Chair, would be, if you go to the next one, no, if you go to the, actually later on, I know Kenny did bring it up, but I want to emphasize one of the other features that we did in order to address another concern, Mr. Chair, and that was the interface between the height of our proposed dwellings. Can you keep going to the elevations? No, next one. No, keep going. So, Mr. Chair, if you look at the top perspective, and you can see it, you could look at the bottom line. You see as you go from east to west, and that's from the left-hand side to the right-hand side, you notice that there is a grade difference in the proposed siding. So that is, you start from the tallest along Yonge Street, where there are no single detached dwellings immediately to the back. And as you move to the west, what we're trying to do, Mr. Chair, is we're trying to lower the blocks. And you can see that by that line. So in the middle, you've got almost a 2-foot difference in grade. And then as you get to the west, you can see that it's almost 4 feet. So there's a gradation of what we've tried to do. There's a gradation in the height and the interface. And that's what we heard that night from the residents immediately behind us. So that's another feature, Mr. Chair, that we've implemented as a result of what we heard. Can you go back to the site plan? Back up to, actually, no, you don't. Go back to the parking. Yeah, keep going down. There, thank you. So, Mr. Chair, one of the features, and Mr. Ng did allude to it, So this is the obviously the underground portion where the parking is, and there's the ramp on the right-hand side. So as you come in, so you drive in, and then you could see how we've depicted where the car is parked. So each unit is afforded 2 parking spaces. You park your car, and then right behind the car, you can see a set of stairs. And what you do is get out of your car and you just walk up the stairs into your unit. So that's what you see in terms of access. And then on top of that, of course, we have the surface parking, which is for the visitors along the south side of the roadway. So I just wanted to give you the more detail on that. If you go back to the site plan. So this is obviously the site plan perspective. So in terms of the rear yards, Mr. Chair, we've done our best. We are providing a 6.5 meter rear yard setback, whereas the town standard is 7.5. But Mr. Chair, these units are wider than average. They're over 6 meters in width. So in our opinion, Mr. Chair, we think that we have provided a reasonable effort in trying to comply with the town standards in terms of rear yard privacy area. And so that shows you, and then on top of that, as Kenny had alluded, we are providing a 1.8 meter privacy fence along the entirety of the south lot line. And the other thing, Mr. Chair, we were asked about is the design. You see the black and white versions of the elevations. We decided, even though we're not at the site plan stage yet, it was an important issue. So we asked our architect to come up with a depiction of what the townhouses could look like. And we asked them to be as logical and as obviously as realistic as you can under where we are in the process. And we have provided those for you. Can you get to the colored perspectives? So, Mr. Chair, this gives you a very good indication, and it actually even lays out the site as the site plan is shown. So this is coming in from Yonge Street, and you could see the surface parking spots, the visitors on the left-hand side. And this is the rendition currently. As Kenny said, this is going to go through a very detailed town urban design review. And we're most welcome with that, and we'll work diligently with town staff. But we just wanted to show you generally what these units could look like, particularly at this stage without a formal site plan submitted. We just want to make sure everybody's up to speed as to what the things could look like. And I also believe I provided some turning diagrams. If you can, yeah, keep going. So, Mr. Chair, one of the other issues, thank you. One of the other issues that arose that night is because of our design, because we've got that turning circle, the turning radius at the far west. We were asked, well, how about fire trucks? How about garbage trucks? So what we did, Mr. Chair, we provided a very technical design here to show you that our design will more than be able to accommodate the turning radiuses as per the town standards for fire trucks, garbage trucks. And then we also looked at below, Mr. Chair, for regular vehicles with the underground parking spaces. So, Mr. Chair, those are my comments at this time. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to make this presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Casablas. I will now open it to members of the public. Are there any members of the public that would like to come up and speak? Going once, going twice. Okay, I will close the public portion of this meeting. Council, the recommendation is that report number PDS 24-094 be received, and two, that the comments presented at the statutory public planning meeting be addressed by Planning and Development Services in a report to a future committee of the whole meeting. Would someone like to move that? Councillor Gilliland, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Kim, thank you. Council, any comments or questions to the report or to the applicant? Councillor Gardner. Sorry, go ahead there. Councillor Gardner again. Go ahead.
Thank you. This is cluster residential. What is the proposed lot coverage?
Mr. Rono?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure if any, Kenny, sorry if you can pull that up, but just to clarify as well, a portion of the site is it has a dual designation now. The regional corridor designation under the new official plan. The westerly portion of the property still has a cluster residential designation. And the proposed amendment is to consolidate the lands under the one regional corridor designation.
Councillor?
Thank you. Would you know the density for the cluster residential portion?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the cluster residential designation under OPA 34 allows 2 units per acre. This is a 2-acre site, 20 townhomes. Obviously, it's a lot higher than that. But again, the portion along Yonge Street does have a regional corridor designation, and the only density provision there is a maximum height of 5 stories.
Councillor?
Thank you. And how much of the Mr. Mayor, I would have liked to have seen mapping as we often have that goes the zones and the environmental features. So I'll ask you about the environmental features in a moment. Actually, I'll ask you about that now. It would be nice to have had the map, as we usually do, of the environmental features.
Mr. Romano?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, there is a woodlot to the west and to the north. The majority of the existing woodlot doesn't apply to this land, but that very westerly portion has some tree coverage. We do have a natural environmental evaluation that has been submitted as part of the application. It's something that we'll certainly review. Again, the portion, none of the lands are within the Conservation Authority regulation limit, but we have a number of background studies that will be reviewed prior to us bringing back a report for council's consideration.
Councillor?
And as it stands, what is the buffering area to the woodlot?
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I can direct again, Ken, there's only a portion of the, I don't know, Kenny, if you can call up the air photo.
You can tell me later. Thank you. Council, I would like to try and convince you this evening, looking at our new draft OP. I'm looking at section 23. I'm going to read from it. Section 23 is Yonge Street South Secondary Plan, OPA 34. As Mr. Munoz said, this was a hard fought battle at the OMB, and we did win 2 units per acre. This whole area, the Yonge Street South, is contained within the Oak Ridges Moraine, which, as we know, is a significant and sensitive landform of provincial interest. In section 23.2.1, it says, and this is our OP, it is intended that the area will continue to develop as low density, primarily residential. New development will be characterized primarily by ground-oriented housing located in clusters of smaller lots or on larger individual lots. And addressing the regional corridor, section 23.2.13 says, while Yonge Street is identified as an urban residential corridor, due to the location of the secondary plan within the Oak Ridges Moraine, it is intended by the town that development along Yonge Street will continue to serve as low-density gateway to Aurora. New development along the edges of Yonge Street and urban design shall be distinctive and will require limited building height or massing. Now, I don't know what the limited building height or massing is. You can tell me that later, or you can tell me that now, Mr. Runo. What is our intent in the OP by limited?
So you,
building
Mr.
height?
Mayor, again, it's pretty clear under the new official plan, we've identified intensification corridors for modest intensification, and the Yonge Street corridor has a height limit of maximum of 5 stories that allows apartment buildings.
Counselor?
Thank you. But we have said in our own official plan that for this area, we do not want that. We want, as it says, ground-oriented housing located in clusters or on individual lots. Again, from the OP, general objectives, development shall only be approved where it is demonstrated that significant natural areas are protected. So in this case, we don't seem to have any except the woodlot. That would need to be protected.
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, again, we've got to look at both documents in this case, the new regional official plan and the standalone secondary plan, OPA 34. With respect to the woodlot, immediately to the west, I may have misspoke earlier, there really isn't any vegetation or significant tree coverage on this parcel. Immediately to the west is the a property that's owned by York Region that contains the water tower, and that woodlot that's identified in some of our documents, OPA 34, is primarily on the York Regional property, but it also extends north of this along the western edge of the 3 other properties to the north of this along Yonge Street. But again, as part of our review, Mr. Mayor and Council, we've got all the background studies, and obviously the environmental reports are key, and we'll ensure that they are evaluated as per official plan and good environmental practices when we do report back.
Counselor?
Thank you. I'm going to continue to refer to the official plan, general objectives, to provide for a variety of housing types and forms compatible with the desired low density, environmentally sensitive character of the area, and under residential land use policies. The intent of these policies is a guide for council when considering the appropriateness of development proposals. So I would submit that everything that I've read that is in our OP is instructing us not to approve this type of housing. Thank you.
You, Counselor Reese?
Thank you. One of the things I focused on was the regional corridor, and I'm wondering through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ramuno, since about 2/3 of it is in the regional corridor and 1/3 is out, can you comment on the consequences of that?
Romano?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. So, and that's the intent of their official plan amendment, is to expand that regional corridor to the extent of their property boundary. So it's something that we'll certainly take a look at moving forward. Along this stretch of Yonge Street, particularly the west side of Yonge Street, we'll review what we think is a logical extension of any of the regional corridor. The way it was identified in our new official plan was really just, that it straddled both sides of Yonge Street. There was no definitive boundary or measurement, but that's something on a case-by-case basis. They were required to submit an amendment to the official plan to deal with that extension of the regional corridor. But we'll look at that. There are really only a couple properties left along Yonge Street, particularly the 3 properties to the north of this site, and 1 or 2 along the left balance of Yonge Street. So it's something that they're required to amend the official plan to determine if it's appropriate to expand it this is an isolated, it is fragmented, as I mentioned. To the west, you've got the regional tower property. It's not going to be developed. And then you've got 3 other parcels to the north, to Ridge Road. We've already met with those landowners. They attended the community information meeting, and they have come to talk to us at a consultation stage about submitting their own application. So they do want to work with this applicant, and one of our requirements moving forward with any application is ensure that they are dealt with comprehensively, and there's the ability for interconnection for the purposes of road connections and servicing connections. Again, we'll also look at the environmental reports to ensure that if there are any environmental features on any properties, that they are protected.
Counselor.
Thank you. The next question I have is in the community information meeting, I wasn't there. So were there no comments about height, because the height as well as the setbacks are significantly different than what is allowed? Can you expand on that, please, through you, Chair?
Mr. Romero.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, there were comments about height and density and setbacks. I think Mr. Kotsopoulos addressed some of the comments relating to height, and I think the intent of this application is not to come in with a 5-story building. I think his original proposal, when he submitted back in 2021, was for 5 lots. They did a couple of years ago revise it with this 20 townhouse proposal at 3 stories, and that was part of the discussion. And his intent was to provide that transition, as Mr. Kotsopoulos mentioned, not to propose 5 stories here, but a 3-story townhomes as a bit of a transition to the detached lots to the south. They are proposing a 6.5 meter rear yards, so it's a slightly smaller than our typical 7.5 meter rear yard. Just to keep in mind, though, however, that typical 7.5 meter rear yard does apply to ground related housing like singles, semis, and townhomes. Just keep in mind that our new official plan does identify this as a regional corridor. Having said that, we certainly need to address matters such as buffering, setbacks, landscaping requirements, urban design requirements as well.
Counselor.
Thank you. And the matters to be addressed yet, there seems to be a number of them. I think I counted 8. What is the time frame for the applicant to come back with those reports and to complete this application? Do you have any idea of what that might be, through you, Mayor?
Mr. Romero.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the applicant, on page 5, we list the number of background reports. They've submitted all the background reports required. They're under review. So, again, it's up to the applicant now. If council directs us to, continue to move forward and come back to a committee of the whole, we'll work with the applicant. It could probably take a couple months to finalize the review. Again, we won't bring back a final report for council's consideration until we have everything reviewed by our internal and external departments and agencies.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor.
And I think my last one. There's no mention in here at all about affordable housing, since Councillor Gartner brought up the comment of the official plan, and our official plan asking for 35% of every development. Has there been any discussion with York Housing Inc. or any other comments regarding affordability?
Mr. Romero.
Through you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Now with York Housing, because I think this is a relatively smaller project, I don't think they would, obviously at this scale would be interested in partnering on this site. We have had those discussions with the owner, and I think that's one reason he is proposing, I think, townhomes, as opposed to, he does have a relatively narrow parcel. So there could be some, practical challenges of proposing a 5-story building, but I think his preference is to go with the 3-story townhomes that provide that, a variety of different opportunities for potential buyers in the town.
Counselor.
Thanks. That's all I have for this round.
Thank you. Counselor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to summarize, what I read from the report is that you have cluster residential on the western portion. You have regional corridor that accommodates higher density up to 5 stories. And the common denominator is that they both do allow for townhouses, albeit the western portion, the density is not as great. I suspect that should anyone at the OLT interpret this, and you have to amalgamate the two zones, it would make sense from their view that the region corridor is the western side is aligned with the Yonge corridor as opposed to vice versa, because they are for intensification. So, I mean, the biggest, my takeaway is that there's a need for us to review the front, back, and side yard setback along with the height. And so through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ramuno, what is the reason for their setbacks to be so slight compared to what is in the current zoning?
Mr. Renault?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Kim, if you're asking specifically about the zoning exceptions on page 6 and 7.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, the OP is, permitted uses is one thing we look at. So they require a zoning bylaw amendment as well, because these lands still have the old historic rural zone. So what we do in this chart on page 6 and 7 is identify what the application is proposing in the way of development standards vis-a-vis our existing townhouse zone that's in our official plan. So they're really only asking for I guess it's the 4, slight exceptions. Obviously, one's the lot area, front yard setback. Quite frankly, this is pretty typical just because this is a block condominium type townhouse development. I think the two that council or residents may consider a little more significant are the exceptions to the rear yard setback. But in my opinion, again, we're still reviewing this. The typical rear yard townhouse setback is 7.5 meters. They're proposing 6.5. And then the maximum height for our existing townhouse zones, which are, again, in my opinion, dated, something we need to update as part of our upcoming zoning review. They're asking for a 12-meter height. Now, they don't have a site plan in, but you've seen the renderings. They're proposing 3-story towns that are slightly over 11 meters high. But I think they're asking for 12 meters just as a buffer, because they haven't finalized the site plan, nor have they finalized their architectural drawing. So it's really minor exceptions to the rear yard setback and to the height of the existing townhouse zoning standard.
Council?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ramuno, regarding the height, again, there are a lot of 3-story townhouses in Aurora, especially in the Leslie, St. John's area. Can you confirm how high those 3-story townhouses are? Did those need exceptions?
Mr. Renault?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes. I mean, all relatively newer townhouse developments require exceptions from that 10-meter standard. A lot of these newer 3-story townhouses, just because they want additional square footage, I think we've gone 11, 12. We may have even gone as high as 13, 11 or 12 meters. I'm certain about that.
Council?
Thank you. And finally, the applicant's representative had mentioned properties to the north, that this property would be a transition to the properties to the north. So that seems to insinuate that it might be even more dense or intense development. So how is that road to Yonge Street going to work out? Is this applicant going to be paying for the road going out to Yonge, and properties to the north will be using this road that they're going to be building as well? Or how is that going to be accommodated?
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and that's why we asked the applicant to prepare the proposed block plan, and I think that's figure figure 9 in our staff report. And we have had a discussion with the property owner to the north that owns the 3 lots to the north. They haven't submitted a formal or conceptual application at this point, but they did mention at the community information meeting that they're interested in coming in with an application, but they are also considering coming in with something a little more dense, 4 or 5 stories as permitted under our official plan. But we did ask for a block plan because if we're going to deal with this application in front of us, we need to ensure that the lands to the north can be interconnected, because we don't think the region is going to provide multiple access points on the Yonge Street. So if you look at Schedule 9, the applicant has laid out how it could work. So if the lands are developed to the north, if they don't get another access point on the Yonge Street, there'll be interconnection with this road network to the south, and ultimately a road connection to Ridge Road.
Counselor.
Thank you.
Counselor Thompson.
Thank you. Just to touch on the last piece on that block plan, that proposed conceptual drawing. If I heard you correctly, Mr. Ramuno, you also said that they may be considering something significantly more dense, 5 stories, perhaps similar to what was just at the last community information meeting of 300 units. Through you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We didn't see anything in detail, and I don't believe the unit count was that high. But again, they just had some discussion about perhaps 4 or 5 story proposal.
Counselor.
Thank you. And I think this is part of the concern of dealing with these lots individually and not necessarily having a more broad look at the development, because everybody's lining up. And I'd hate to see this lower portion of Yonge Street be filled with 5-story dense condominiums and apartment buildings all the way up Yonge Street. It's 2 kilometers long. The Yonge Street South secondary plan, as Councillor Gardner referred to, still exists within our official plan. It's still a policy that we've adopted and try to abide by. I find it at odds with some of the conversation around regional corridors and what we're trying to achieve here. And so I think that should council decide to go forward with this application to committee of the whole, I hope that staff would come back in a more broader based report talking about the regional corridor and how it complements and or is at odds with OPA 34 and the Yonge Street South secondary plan, because Councillor Gardner is right when she quotes parts of it in terms of the intent, the objectives, and what the vision has been for many years, which is still part of the official plan. Now, if we're going to abide by the official plan, we need to stay true to it. Yes, there are parts of Yonge Street South in that regional corridor where it may be appropriate or suitable to have more higher density developments, but I don't think it's in this spot, especially when, we're starting to see other applications come in and hearing about all of the other high density applications that are coming as well. It poses all kinds of challenges, specifically traffic. Every community information meeting we come to in this part, they talk about the problems with traffic because you can only do right in and right out on Yonge Street. And yet we're proposing all this high density, and all of the commercial and amenities for Aurora is north of this location. So how are they going to transition and move around? And so I think there's more work to be done. I think there's more information that needs to be provided to council, not just on this application, or what we're doing with Yonge Street South. Thank you.
Skiller.
Thank you. I had some similar questions about the regional corridor and the 5-story. Through Mr. Chair to Mr. Ramuno, if they were to propose a 5-story building, what type of density would we be looking at as a comparator?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I haven't seen any detailed plans from the applicant to the north, so I can't tell you. I think the combined 3 lots are probably 3 acres. So again, it's hard to know at this time because they haven't come in with something. But what I can add is, we're still at this public planning meeting here, and we have advised the landowners to the north and this landowner to try and work together. I think they are willing to work together. So, at a future date, I'm sure we may see an application from the landowner to the north, and things may then converge with this application. Again, we're still at the early stages, but we wanted to bring this forward to a public planning meeting because the application has been sitting with us for about 3-4 years now.
No, and I think the councilor is asking this lot, not the one to the north of it. If this application was to consider doing a 5-story building on this particular property, how many units roughly do you think would be in there? I think that's what the councilor was asking. Am I correct?
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
Thank you.
My apologies, Mr. Mayor. I think this site is.
My apologies. This site is one acre. So if they were to build a building, again, it's really a question of if it's 5 stories.
Hypothetical. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, it's hard to say. They probably could definitely squeeze more than 20 units out of it.
Councilor?
Perfect. Okay. I just want some context there, and I understand that this is a regional corridor, and I think that was kind of the point I was trying to make. I know that we are trying to intensify on the regional corridors, and it is a segue to our main downtown core area as well as the services as well. And so I do look at this in the context, if we are going to do any intensification, that we are looking specifically in the regional corridors to acquire that height. However, here we have an application to where we're looking at a softer transition to the adjacent homes there, which are townhomes. And I like to think that I take that in consideration. Through Mr. Mayor to Mr. Ramuno, as far as the height request, I think Councillor Kim had touched on that we do have existing homes in the area that are higher than what they're asking. And I'm assuming, if you can clarify, my question is that they're asking for the additional height because of the underground parking concept design that they're presenting. Would that be accurate?
Mr. Romero?
To you, Mr. Mayor, again, I think why they're asking for the additional height of going up just over 11 is because they're proposing 3-story townhomes. So the parking is underground, but we calculate height based on a grade. So the parking would be underground. It's really a function of their 3-story townhomes and not, and they would need more than the 10 or even a bit more than 11 meters.
Councilor?
Thank you. I've heard a lot of comments around the table from all the councillors, so I'm not going to ask a lot of the same questions. Although my personal opinion that if we are going to be intensifying on the regional corridors, that's something I've always supported, especially when we are trying to have connectivity with our downtown core and our services and so forth. So I'm really happy to see that we are looking at townhomes versus 5-story buildings, and seeing how the majority, or at least 2/3 of this property is regional corridor, and we are seeing that the latter half isn't affecting the natural trees and forestry, that, I feel that they've done their due diligence with the reports. I know that we have a lot to come back with from staff, and I know that coming to that committee of the whole or council or so forth, that we're going to get that information back. Through Mr. Mayor to Mr. Ramuno, when we do see this at committee of whole next, will we have those reports ready in order for us to make an informed decision whether or not that they've complied with everything that's outstanding?
Mr. Romero?
To you, Mr. Mayor, yes, certainly. I mean, before I come back with a final report to a committee of the whole, we'll have completed our review and hopefully have addressed, as many comments as possible. But the review of the technical studies will be completed. However, even before we get to that stage, if we do get the application to the north, we'll ensure that the two owners continue to work together. And, council may see, the application to the north, if they do come in soon, before we complete our review of this application.
Councilor?
Thank you. And I do want to give this application the benefit of the doubt and the hard work that staff's doing to work with the applicant. I certainly don't want to be standing in the way of this progression. And obviously we do need to have some shovels in the ground to facilitate more housing. And I think that it would be prudent of us to not hold this back. We don't need to be holding this back. And I believe that at that time, a committee of whole, we can make that assessment. And I'm really glad and looking forward to development on Yonge Street. We need to have more housing in the ground. That's pretty evident. We've been talking about it. All municipalities are in agreement that we need to increase the housing. Townhouses are a market that a lot of first families are looking at acquiring, and it is the market where people are interested in their first home buying experience. And so I do get that, and we need to provide that type of housing. Is it considered the affordable housing? Not everything is, and I understand that, and it is a small little parcel of land. So I do understand the reasoning behind the type of housing you're building. However, I do know that the condominium industry now, they are struggling a little bit, and I understand the capital required in order to facilitate that type of development. And if you're ready and prepared to get the shovels in the ground faster with this development and provide that kind of opportunity for people in our town, then I think that we need to allow this process to move forward at the very least. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Gallo?
Thank you. I won't repeat some of the comments from my colleagues. I share most of them. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ramuno, I heard 2 units per acre, I think is at least on the westerly part of this property. I don't know what the density is on the regional corridor. It's fair to say, if anyone looks at this map, that the homes to the south of this property, and then to the south of Steeplechase and to the east of Yonge Street are nowhere near 2 units per acre. I say that because I want to take into context what's previously. I realize there's no in planning. It doesn't matter what's been agreed to prior to. You take every application on its own, but we certainly can't ignore what we approved in and around this area. Now, is the density that's proposed here appropriate? I think it's yet to be seen. That at least the lot coverage is half of what's allowed. I would encourage the applicant to revisit the rear yard setback. It's 1 meter, 3 feet, but it's also giving that distance farther away from the homes to the south. I don't have an issue with the maximum height of 12 meters. You can go right across the street, and those were built 28 years ago, and they are 12 meters high. So there's plenty of examples of that. That doesn't bother me. But I don't have an issue with it going to the next phase. There are significant areas that need to be addressed. I'm hopeful that they will be addressed properly. I would like to see a report, perhaps along the lines of what Councillor Thompson was saying. I want to also see it in the context of what's existing and what we've already allowed in that corridor. Unfortunately, we have to look at these applications through the lens of whatever we do, can we defend it? Can we not defend it? And that's a reality today. And that's how I will be looking at these applications. I'm not in favor of fighting for something that isn't defendable. I think that's a losing cause, and it doesn't get us anywhere. I am in favor of making the best application we possibly can with the resources that we have, and negotiating where it's appropriate and where it's not, and where there's red lines that are crossed, we say no, and we defend as much as we possibly can. But I need to know those before I can make those decisions. So I'll be in support of the motion on the floor.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, we're talking about the Oak Ridges Moraine here. The province considered it so significant that they did a special plan for this area, and we followed suit. We put in OPA 34. We won a big battle at the OMB for those 2 units per acre. And yes, we do need townhouses, but I would submit we don't need them on land that is part of the Oak Ridges Moraine. And we just recently passed our official plan with so much work, and we did make changes. And here we have in our official plan, we've left this, that part of this property is intended to continue to develop as low density primary residential. And we've also taken into account the Yonge Street South corridor. You know, we've said, yes, it's identified as a corridor, regional corridor. But due to the location of the secondary plan of this very plan, OPA 34, that it is intended by the town that development along Yonge Street South will continue to serve as low density. So we've just finished this. And at least for the portion that is not on the regional corridor, and if the regional corridor is part of OPA 34, then I think that's problematic as well, but I can't speak to that. But why do we have an OP? I'm looking forward to this coming back to council, and I'm looking forward to, notwithstanding what any of the gentlemen in the audience think about what I've said, this is our planning Bible. So you need to pay attention to it. This is not about profit. This is about Aurora's official planning policy. Thank you.
Councilor Reese, second time.
Yes, I neglected to ask a question that I typically ask because I don't see anything on the plan about amenity space, gathering spaces, things of that nature. And I know we have a paucity of those types of things in this area already. So I would really like the applicant, I'm in support of the motion for right now, but I'd really like the applicant to take comments seriously here and come up with a plan that can deal with many of these issues that we have expressed by all the councillors here. But I'll be voting in favor of this motion to go forward so we can see it again and see what happens with the regional work that needs to be done that was brought up by the staff and has been identified in the community information meeting as well as these comments here. So thank you. That's all I have.
Yeah. Mr. Thomas, the second time.
Thank you. Just one other point I wanted to tag on to, and Councillor Weiss had raised it with respect to affordable housing, and he had mentioned York housing, but I mean there are other avenues to pursue. I mean, there's Habitat for Humanity. I remember with the Daniels group, they were doing townhouses, and perhaps that's an option. Within our official plan that we just approved, we talk about a higher standard in transit areas, and if the applicant's going to rely on the regional corridor as a rationale for why they should have higher density, well then we also need to look at affordable housing within that application as well, because we identified that in those so-called higher density regional corridor type areas that there should be a mix, that there should be a greater percentage. And so I think the applicant should just demonstrate what they're going to do for affordable housing.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing none before I call the vote. Councillor Gallo, go ahead. Second time.
Just a quick one. I meant to ask you before. Through you to Mr. Uno, are there rear yard minimum setbacks in regional corridors?
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, our official plan doesn't get into that detail with respect to setbacks, right? We leave that up to the zoning bylaw. And again, the typical rear yard setback for townhomes under our bylaw is 7.5 meters, and they are proposing 6.5 meter rear yard.
So through you, there's no difference on either portion of the property, either the regional corridor property or whatever the zoning is on the west side.
Mr. Romano?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah. So I guess if the question is, under the cluster residential designation and the zoning that we've passed for cluster residential, like the subdivision to the south, I'd have to check. But again, our typical residential detached dwelling residential setback is 7.5 meters. A lot of these lots in that area are larger lots, and they may have larger than 7.5, but that is our minimum standard.
Okay, so is it, just because the easterly part of the property is on a regional corridor that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to reduce the rear yard setback.
Mr. Rono?
Through Mr. Mayor, no, not necessarily, right? It's part of the discussion we're having with council as we move forward with the final design.
Okay. That was it. Thank you.
Any other? Councillor Kim, second.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm prepared to move this along to the committee of the whole, but my request to Mr. Marco, Mr. Romano and the team is that they come back with a report that is pretty definitive in terms of how they read the planning structure as it exists today. York Region planning really today doesn't exist, but their official plan still exists. You know, we are the master of our planning destiny, but we still seem to work off the OP. And so there's overlap and there's a little bit of confusion as to what takes precedence. I do agree with Councillor Gallo that I have to look through the lens of what is defensible, what is permissible, not necessarily what I want or what the residents want, because that's ideally how we would all like to vote. So should this go to the committee of the whole, I hope that the planning team will come back with their definitive interpretation of what is permissible and what is defendable so that it can guide council at that stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Second time? The other one left? Go ahead.
You. Just listening to some of the comments about the official plan, and yeah, we did do a lot of hard work with this official plan and identifying where we felt that it was appropriate to do intensification. And we've had several conversations around the table where we feel that this would be appropriate. And the regional corridor is definitely a place that we have identified as this type of intensification. I also do recall some council members around this table making comments about our official plan being a living document. So it seems to me it can be sometimes convenient to say this is our OP and we should follow it rule by rule, but then there's other times that we'll say this is a living document. So we do need to look at things through the lens, to Councillor Gallo's point, to whether it's defensible or not. We do have to look at the history and the precedents that has been set. And we do have to have a whole overview of what's being presented. And this is why we're at public planning tonight. This is why we're looking at this report. This is why we're waiting for all the additional information that we're all waiting to hear back. I feel like there has been some very healthy conversation working with this applicant and also adjacent to the ones north. So the fact that they've gone another way to actually have this conversation with other property owners to see if this would be a smooth transition seems positive for me. And if we are looking at density as a lot lower than a 5-story, to me, I think we're on the right track to having some good conversations to get to where we want to be. So for me, I don't want to stand in the way of progressing this conversation. I trust staff in working with the applicant and ensuring that the right information is here and we can determine whether or not this is appropriate. So again, I will be in favor of moving this over to committee of the whole and having further conversations with staff and the applicant about their takeaways today and if there are some changes to the site plan or the block site plan and how that's going to be reflected. So those are my comments just in some of the things I've heard around the table, and I'm happy to move this forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, the OP is a flexible document. We do need to be flexible, but it needs it, as was mentioned, I think by a couple of councillors already, is that it needs to be defendable. Our objective is always to do the best, not only for the present, but for the future of our community and any development application that comes before us. And I appreciate all the comments around this table. And I think we are on the right path, but I think that there's still some adjustments that are needed. And I hope that the applicant has been listening, takes all those comments into consideration, sharpens their pencils, and when they come back, they make any necessary adjustments. They've shown that they've made some adjustments just from hearing from the community information meeting. So I believe there's a willingness to make adjustments to what they've heard around this table. Hopefully they'll do that. And we get the committee of the whole. We'll have an application that we can move forward with that the residents of this community are willing to accept and that we can move forward with as a council as well. That is the best possible application in the area. I'll call the vote. Councilor Gallo? Yeah, Councilor Gallo is a yes. I forgot you didn't have it here, sir. Councilor Gardner? Councilor Gardner is a yes. Carries unanimously. Confirming bylaw. Someone like to move that. Councilor Gilliland, second by Councilor Weiss. Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Motion to adjourn. Councilor Kim, Councilor Gallo, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We're adjourned. For the members of the public, if you do fill out that green form, so you're kept informed of the future meeting, and hopefully continue to provide your comments, because we